My apologies for this late episode. My wife and I had some anniversary plans. We've been married 8 years now, and I wanted to catch Demon Slayer Infinity Train in theaters. Nothing quite as romantic as action-packed anime on the big screen. Anyway, I worked my little vocal cords off to get this collection of new and allegedly true scary stories to you today, featuring haunted trees, disturbing specters, and warps in time. Enjoy. Do me a solid and leave this episode a like, follow and rate Unexplained Encounters on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and subscribe to Darkness Prevails on YouTube. And don't forget to send me your scary stories of the unknown at darkstories.org. I would love to read your tale on the next episode. Thank you. Now then, let's begin. Hellhound in my hometown. From Untold Horrors. When I was around 16 years old, my family lived in a small town in Michigan. It only had a population of about 1,000 people. We didn't have a lot of money when I was growing up, so we didn't have internet or cable. So every night I'd walk down to my local library while it was closed and mooch off of their free Wi-Fi so I could watch YouTube and download music and other internet-related things. I had to catch up with all my friends and TV shows. Sometimes I'd even watch a movie while I was down there. I loved sitting in silence in the history of my own town. My town is old, very old. It was an original stop on the first railway system we used to use in America. The apartments sit on top of businesses and the houses are all 100 plus years old. It has a lot of supernatural lore, like Dr. Blood and Blood Cemetery of the Graveyard Cults. But I never personally had an experience with those. I never visited Blood Cemetery to mock Mr. Blood. This story is an entirely separate experience from anything else my town has to offer, unless you count mysterious disappearing fog. Normally, I'd be there for about an hour or so, just enjoying what little time I had with the internet. But one night was slightly more eventful than the others. It was midsummer when I was sitting outside the library again, listening to some music. As I'm sitting there, I feel this chill fill the air around me, and suddenly a violent barking erupts from nowhere, causing all the dogs in the neighborhood to go mad. This bark, though, wasn't natural. It shook every building and my whole body. Almost immediately after, all the dogs went quiet at the same time. It was eerily quiet, to the point of hearing the wind whisper. I searched the street for several minutes, but saw no sign of the beast that could awaken and then silence all the normal dogs. I got a sick feeling in my stomach, and I knew then that I needed to hide. I barricaded myself in one of these stairways that led to an apartment and pressed my back against the door. I could feel a cold wind rushing underneath the door, and I could hear deep, deep breathing. This was accompanied by the smell of sulfur burning my nose. The way it was smelling me was as if it was trying to remember my scent for when it had a chance at me. Then it started to push against the door. Hard, harder than I could almost bear. I could hear it trying to claw its way into me. After a few minutes, the pressure went away, and the dogs all stopped barking. I waited until I felt safe to leave the stairway. Then I began walking home. I didn't want to run in case the hound wanted to pursue me, so I walked instead, slowly at first, but when, little by little, the neighborhood dogs began barking in sequence with my progression towards home, I knew the beast was following me. It was getting close. I could feel its presence behind me, so I broke into a run, and I didn't stop until I was safely behind my own door at home. I have no idea why it wanted me, why it chose me of all people to victimize, but the feeling it gave off, that told me I wanted nothing to do with this hellhound. I stopped going out late after that, and a few months after, we ended up getting internet at home. So I never had to leave the safety of my house at night again. Not that I ever planned to after that. I'd rather not chance a second encounter with one of the guardians of hell. The wrong cousin in our living room. From Kudzi. I'm from Zimbabwe. My sister Rachel and I are big fans of the show since the COVID era. As such, I've decided to share a story of my own that happened about 6 months ago. I was born and raised in a Christian family in Goromonzi, which is a town 40 kilometers northeast of Harare, Zimbabwe. I work and stay in the city during weekdays, but I go home every Friday for the weekend to visit my parents. Our home is situated in farming plots, meaning there is quite a distance from our home to our neighbor's house. Let's say about 1.5 to 2 kilometers. One Friday, I went home for the weekend as per usual. Maybe to better understand, I can give you the layout of our house. We have one front door which leads to the living room. As you enter the living room, the door to your immediate left is my parents' bedroom. As you progress, you have another door to your left, which leads to a room which my sister and I share. After that, and still to your left again, will be another room, which we use as a kitchen, and directly opposite that is my brother's room. I had gone to sleep with my sister when around 2 a.m. I felt a heavy sinking feeling in my chest, a feeling of being sucked down. Over time, I've come to recognize these are telltale signs of sleep paralysis about to take over. It was then that I had a weird dream. In that dream, I saw one of our cousins walk through our main door and enter our living room, as if in real time, seemingly wanting to enter my parents' bedroom. Now, this cousin, I'll call her Angela, had in real life passed away just 2 weeks ago, having succumbed to an illness. Angela's face looked all wrong. Her eyes were too big, her cheeks sunken, her gaze unblinking, and her frame too gaunt. I could only see a dark color in her eyes, and no pupils, nor any other features of the eyes of a normal person. She did not speak. She just made motions, again as if she wanted to get into my parents' room. The sinking feeling had now mixed with a sense of dread, and I suddenly shouted, "Buddha Panze!" which in Shona, our native language, translates to "get out" in English. Mind you, I shouted this whilst sleeping, but then the dream stopped instantly. But I didn't wake up right then. My mother, who had heard me shout, came and opened the door to our room to find me sleeping, like a baby in fact. In the morning, as I was doing my chores, I suddenly remembered what had happened. Feeling a bit guilty, silly, and shy, I apologized to my mom for making noise during the night. The bad thing is, this wasn't the first time this has happened, so I'm now used to waking up and apologizing to my parents for making loud noises if I would have sensed something the night prior. Just as I was finishing talking to Mom, Dad interjected. "I had a weird dream too around the same time, before Mom came to check on you girls," he said. "In the dream, I saw a witch doctor entering through the front door, and I began to pray. After your shout, I did not see anything thereafter." In most African Christian households, a witch doctor is something associated with evil. One can only guess who or what really tried to visit us that night. Our dreams were almost the same, and ended at the same time. So I wonder, what was it really? Thank you for giving me a chance to share. My Father and the Dragon. From Tempest Clone 729. You can call me Alex. This is a story my father used to tell me and my siblings when we were younger. It happened to him in his early 20s, back in the summer of 1978. There were 4 of them that day. My dad, his younger brothers Michael and Eric, and their friend Paul. They had borrowed a small aluminum fishing boat from a neighbor and took it to Caribou Lake, near Lutzen, Minnesota. It's not a well-known lake. Even now, it's tucked deep in the Superior National Forest. No cabins, no beaches, nothing but thick trees and a narrow trail that leads you down to the water. The weather was foggy that evening. My dad always described how heavy it was, so thick you couldn't see the far shore. The fog seemed to muffle the entire forest. No birds called out, no breeze stirred the trees. It felt, as he put it, like the world had been paused, and they were intruding on something that should have been left alone. Michael, the middle brother, was the serious one. He was a few years younger than my dad, but always came across older, a natural worrier who checked knots twice and was particular about tackle. He knew fish, and when they weren't biting, he knew there was a good reason. Eric, the youngest, was only 17 then. He had the kind of energy that never stopped, always the first to speak, the first to laugh, but also quick to scare. He did not like silence, and he definitely didn't like fog. Paul was different. He wasn't family, but might as well have been. He was bold, the type who tried to prove himself whenever he could, but not foolish. When it came to the outdoors, he listened to my dad and Michael, though he had a restless edge about him that made him want to push forward even when the others hesitated. That evening, the four of them cut the motor once they reached deeper water, letting the boat drift as they baited their hooks. Usually, Caribou Lake was generous with walleye or the occasional northern pike, but that night the lines dangled without result. They tried the shallows, then deeper water, drifting between the reed beds and the center. But each line they pulled up was stripped clean or not touched at all, not even a tug. It was like the lake had been emptied. After nearly an hour, Michael muttered that something wasn't right, that the water was too still and too quiet. They all knew he wasn't the type to spook easily, and that made his words that much more heavy. Eric whispered back that maybe the fish had gone deep, but the way he clutched the side of the boat betrayed his nerves. Paul said nothing. He was staring out into the fog, the oar resting in his lap. His shoulders were tense like he was waiting for something to show itself. The first ripple came then. My father said it appeared out of nowhere, spreading in slow, wide circles across the surface. The air was so still, and not a sound could be heard besides the water moving. They all froze, their eyes fixed on that circle, widening in the mist. Another ripple followed, farther off but larger, too broad to come from any fish they knew. A third came even closer. And then, without a sound, something vast slid under the boat. It wasn't like a muskie or even a sturgeon. It was far too large. The shadow blotted out the faint glow of the water beneath, wide and long, moving with a steady power that made the little aluminum boat seem like a toy. They sat there, silent, as the shape disappeared into the grayness. A few moments later, the surface broke. My dad never gave an exact description. He always said it was impossible to hold on to details because of that fog, the distance, the shock of it all. But what he remembered was the sheer size and the movement. A long serpentine head lifted briefly above the water, dark and slick, eyes catching what little light filtered through the mist. They weren't glowing or monstrous. They were reflective, pale, unblinking, fixed on the boat. Then the body rolled past, ridged and muscular, black-green against the fog. Too long and too vast to be something contained in a single lake. They sat frozen there, barely daring to breathe as it circled them once. The boat rocked hard, aluminum groaning. Eric let out a sharp gasp. Michael whispered for them to stay still. Paul gripped his oar so tightly his knuckles went white. The creature passed beneath again, then surfaced on the other side. The water was swelling around it. Every time it appeared, the fog seemed to close around it. It began trailing them. Each time they dipped their oars to move, it followed, sometimes only a few yards off, sometimes sliding under the boat with its long shadow blotting out everything below. It would break the surface briefly, just the arch of its back, or a coil sliding through the mist, then sink silently again. My dad said it was like being followed by a storm cloud, something inevitable and ancient that had noticed them and wasn't ready to let them go. The worst was the nudging. The first hit came from beneath, a hard jolt that lifted one side of the boat enough to send water over the edge. They scrambled, gripping the sides, hearts pounding. A second shove came moments later, harder, sliding the boat a few feet sideways. It wasn't trying to sink them. Not yet. It was testing, curious, seeing what they were. The boys rowed harder then, not speaking. Soon the creature surfaced again, closer than before, its head turning toward them, eyes catching the gray light. Then came the sound. My father always paused here when he told the story, his voice quiet, as if recalling it creeped him out. It wasn't a roar or a hiss or a growl. It was this vibration, very low, very deep, and it carried through the water itself. They could feel it in their bones and in the wooden seats of the boat. It was steady and resonant, like the lake itself was humming. None of them spoke. Even Eric, who always filled silence with chatter, stayed quiet. They sat, terrified, as that vibration thrummed through their bones, pressing against them until it finally stopped, leaving only ringing silence. Then the water went still. The creature was gone. They didn't believe it at first. They sat there for a long time, waiting for another ripple or another shadow to appear. But nothing came. It was then that Michael whispered for them to start rowing again. They went slow at first, then faster as the urgency began to mount. They pulled through the fog, blind to where the shore was, only knowing they had to get off that water. Several times they thought they heard it behind them, but when they looked back, there was only more fog. After what felt like ages, reeds scraped the hull. They dragged the boat halfway onto shore and stumbled onto the wet ground, panting. The lake was calm again, silent as it had been at the start, but none of them trusted it. They never did see the creature again. None of them went back to Caribou Lake. My dad always said that the reason they hadn't caught a single fish that night, the reason the lake was so unnaturally quiet, was because that thing had driven everything else away. Fish, birds, everything. Whether you believe the story or not, that's up to you. I'm not even sure I believe it. But if you find yourself out there on the water, especially on a quiet lake in the middle of a thick fog, stay aware, or else something might be just below you and you'll never see it coming. It followed us from house to house. From xoxwickedsoulxox. I have experienced paranormal things since I was around 9. For context, my sister is 3 years older than I am. I'm going to try and describe some of the things we have experienced. Sorry if this is rambling or poorly put together. I've never put this down in writing before, and I'm not the best at writing as it is, so bear with me. When I was about 9 years old, we moved to a house just one house away from my grandmother's, where we had lived since I was a baby. My immediate family consisted of myself, my older sister, and my parents. For context, my mother is part Native American and has always been sensitive to emotions. She is intuitive, empathic, and almost seemed to know things that she couldn't possibly know. As an example, my mother knew my sister was pregnant before my sister did. She was also highly sensitive to the paranormal as a child. My father, on the other hand, was not and did not believe in anything of the sort. I think myself and my sister inherited this from my mother. When we moved down the road from my grandma's, we moved into our friend's old house, as they moved into a bigger place further down the road. We'll call them Heather and Laura. Right before Heather and Laura moved down the road, My sister Ashley and I were hanging out and helping them pack with their aunt, who we'll call B. I don't remember her name, as we only met her twice. B was a gypsy and Wiccan in every sense of the word, from how she dressed to how she acted. While all of us girls were down there, we were talking about the paranormal and Ouija boards. B stated that she had one, and we all played with it. Stupid, I know. However, at the time, nothing happened. Once Heather and Laura moved out, Ashley and I decided to make our own Ouija board to attempt to speak with my grandmother Jewel, my mother's mom, as she had passed away about 5 years before. We had bunk beds in our room. Ashley was on the top and I on the bottom. We were sitting on Ashley's bed while we played our makeshift Ouija board and trying to get something to communicate back to us. Again, nothing happened. We ended the session the same way B showed us and waited a while before trying again, this time in the dining room. We had a little bit of movement this time. However, neither of us thought it was real. Each of us thought it was the other messing with them. Later that night, Ashley was sitting in her bed and we were listening to music and just playing around. I was on the bottom bunk at the time when she said that she got shoved off the top bunk and she hit the floor hard. I stated that maybe it was just Grandma trying to mess with her, and she cried out that whatever it wasn't Grandma. She thinks we let something bad in. She asked if we could switch beds for a while, as she was scared to be on the top bunk after that, afraid of getting shoved again. For this next part, it's important to know our bedroom has 2 windows. One that was on the far right wall towards the end of the bed, and one that was sort of sandwiched between the bunk bed, so you could see the very bottom part of the window from the lower bed, and you could see the majority of the window from the top bunk. We did not keep blinds on the windows, just a sheet that we would pull open when it was warm in the room and we wanted some breeze while trying to sleep. While I was on the top bunk, we were lying there talking about her experience, and I looked out the window. That's when I saw a small shadowy figure out at the end of the road by our mailbox. Near our mailbox, we had a street light, so there was ample light near that area. But this very dark mass was maybe knee-high to me. I was about 5 feet tall at the time. This shadow seemed to be peeking at the window from around the mailbox, but I could only see a hand with what appeared to be claws and a head. I stared at it while describing it to Ashley and got this sense of dread in my stomach. I rolled over and bent down to look at Ashley while talking to her on the bottom bunk, and when I rolled back over, I looked at the mailbox, but it was gone. I sighed, thinking whatever it was had left. However, movement drew my attention to the large tree outside our bedroom window. The shadow was now leaning out from around the tree. I could still see the head and the clawed hands, but more details now. It was darker than the rest of the normal shadows outside. It had dark red eyes, and it was smiling at me, with a mouth that seemed too big for how small it was, and it had very sharp, pointed teeth. I remember staring at it in fear, just explaining to Ashley what I was seeing. She was freaking out, begging me to pull the sheet down and stop looking at it, which I eventually did. After this incident, we stopped playing with the Ouija board, mostly due to Ashley being scared, and she would not play with it with me, and I didn't want to play alone. Nothing really happened at this house after that. However, during summer break and weekends, I would stay down at my grandmother's house, and while there I would sleep on the love seat or the floor in the living room. My grandmother had one of the large big-screen TVs with the huge backs that was placed in the corner of the room, and my grandmother slept on the couch. One night while spending the night, I woke up just before dawn. The living room was dark, and the only light coming into the room was from down the hall in the kitchen. My grandmother had a boxer named Bubba that was asleep at my feet. I wasn't sure why I was awake at the time, until I noticed that Bubba was growling. I lay there, trying to figure out what he was growling at, when I noticed he was looking at the TV. I focused on the TV when I noticed that there was a dark, full figure staring over my grandmother, sort of leaning over her with a creepy grin. I stayed as still as I could, watching this figure and trying to get Bubba to come closer to me. In my panic, I woke my grandmother up, who asked why I was freaking out, and I explained what I was seeing. Her response was, "Oh, it's probably just my mother looking over me." Her parents were actually buried in the garden. I whispered at her in a panic as this shadow had turned its head slightly as if it were looking at me through the TV, and I told her that I didn't think it was her mother. I just lay there watching the hallway on the TV until the sun came up. Then and only then was I finally able to feel normal again. After that, it was mostly footsteps heard, but nothing being there and fingerprints being found in spots no one would ever go. Fast forward a few years, and I'm currently around 15. My family had moved out of the house due to issues with the landlord and moved into a trailer park. My sister has since moved out, and it was just myself and my parents. The layout of the trailer is important to this experience. The trailer was a small 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom trailer, and my father slept in the living room on a hospital bed due to some health issues, making it hard for him to sleep in a normal bed. When you walk in the front door, to the right of the door is a couch in the cove of the windows. On the opposite wall of the couch is the area my dad's hospital bed was, and a chair adjacent to that. There are built-in cabinets that separate the living room from the dining room/living room. So there's an archway of built-ins that have glass cabinets on both sides. When you walk through the archway, to the left is the kitchen, and on the right is the dining room/computer room. In the middle of the kitchen/dining room is a door that leads down a hallway to the bedrooms and bathroom. When you walk down the hallway, on the left-hand side is my bedroom about midway down from the main door. A few feet away from my room is the bathroom. The bathroom layout was very small and compact. When you walked into the bathroom, to the right was a double sink and a large mirror. Behind the door was the stackable washer and dryer. Right next to the washer and dryer was the toilet, and on the back wall was the bathtub. At the very back of the trailer is my mom's room. Her room was the biggest out of the two, and had built-ins everywhere. When you walked into the room, straight across from the door on the far side, built-in closets with drawers underneath covered the entirety of the back wall. In between the closets was a built-in vanity with drawers. The bed was located in the middle of the room, and on the wall closest to the door was another wall of built-in closets that took up the entire area of the wall. During this time, I was dating someone we'll call Brandon, who would come over a lot, spend the night on occasions, and we had friends and family that also lived in the park that would come over all the time. My best friend, who we'll call Holly, she's like a sister to me, her brother Eric, my sister Ashley, and her boyfriend Jesse would all hang out during this and had all experienced something in the house. One night I was asleep in my room with a TV on after school. I slept most of the night and suddenly woke up unable to move, and the TV turned off. I attempted to move or yell out to my parents for help, but nothing came out. I was only able to shift my eyes towards my closet. When I did, I saw a faint green glow, which for some reason sent shivers through my body. When I shifted my eyes back to the ceiling to stop looking at the light, I saw what I can only explain as a floating head. I was in a state of panic, but unable to move. I started crying and willing myself to move all at once. Everything stopped, and I was able to move again. So I jumped out of bed, turned on my light, and ran out of the room, down to the kitchen to find my dad. I explained to him what happened, so my dad let me hang out with him the rest of the night. When I started to chill out finally, I checked the time. It was 2 a.m. I stayed up the rest of the night with my dad, baking. After that, any time I was in my bedroom alone, I always kept the door open a crack and kept my bedroom light on. Myself, my mother, Ashley, and my best friend Holly all experienced a shadow man that would walk across the bathroom while you were in there, normally in the shower. However, due to how small the bathroom was, it was impossible to walk across the room as this shadow did. One day, while myself, Brandon, Holly, Eric, Jesse, Ashley, and my mother were sitting in the living room/dining room, talking and listening to music, I walked down to the bathroom and heard noises coming from my mother's room. I peeked in after I was done using the restroom to find all the drawers and closets open and everything thrown around. I got a strange feeling of being watched when I walked in. The weird part was, the 2 closets and drawers on the far end of the room were not used often, due to being hard to open and close. I walked back down the hall to the computer room and asked if anyone had been in my mother's room just now. Everyone looked at me confused and said no one had moved. I explained what I saw and heard, and we all went back down to look. Everyone had a strange feeling while down there. My mother started to put everything back and noticed some small things missing, such as a lighter and things of that sort. The hallway of the trailer was fine during the day. However, at night you had the feeling of something or someone watching you, and would often get that feeling of being followed when you walked back down towards the kitchen from the bathroom. Our dogs would often stand at the entryway of the hallway and growl, or just stare as if seeing something. When home alone, I would keep the doorway closed and avoid going down there unless I had one of the dogs with me, and I would quickly make my way back down to the living room and shut the door until my parents were home. About a year or a year and a half after we moved into the trailer, my sister moved back in due to a housing situation, and she shared a room with my mother as she was pregnant, and it was the biggest room in the house. While Ashley and my mother shared a room, they both saw an old woman in white in the vanity mirror that would walk around the room and watch them while they slept. Ashley stayed for a few months and moved in with her boyfriend's family. Shortly after that, I found out I was pregnant with my son. I was 17 at the time, so my mother switched rooms with me and my boyfriend, who had started to live with us. A month before my son was born, my father committed suicide and overdosed in the living room. This was in April of 2009. After his funeral, we stayed with my Aunt Kim, at which point we saw and heard a little girl walking around our house and would call out to us in the middle of the night. I had a visitation dream of my father shortly before my son was born, telling me he was okay, that he loved me, and to not be sad as he was no longer in pain. I stopped having dreams after this for years, and the experiences stopped for a while as well. While staying with my aunt, we were packing and moving out of the trailer my dad passed away in, and we found items that had gone missing in my closet, which had not been there before. Cut to 2020. My then boyfriend and my younger 2 kids moved back from Tennessee and stayed with Ashley until we got a house of our own. While staying with Ashley, we were informed that we were unable to touch or move a dream catcher on the wall, as the ghost or whatever was attached to it would get angry and would throw things or shove people when you did. You would often catch the ghost of a girl peeping at you from around the corner upstairs, or hear her walking and talking while you sat at the dining room table at the base of the stairs. While cleaning the house and painting the kids' bedrooms with my 2 children, Lydia and Lilith, and my niece Sage, we heard the basement door slam shut. At the time, we were the only ones in the house, and the door was locked. Just the 4 of us lived in that house for about a year, when Ashley and her youngest child, Emma, Holly and her oldest child, Sage, came to stay with us. My bedroom and the kids' bedrooms were all upstairs at the time. Emma shared a room with Lydia, and Sage shared a room with Lilith, while Ashley slept in the living room and Holly slept in the office. In the middle of the 3 bedrooms upstairs, we had a game room with a TV and Xbox and a futon to sit on. It was about midnight, and the kids were asleep. I was sitting in the playroom playing the Hogwarts game. While sitting there, I heard a small voice saying, "Mommy?" I got up and went to check on the kids, but they were all asleep, so I sat back down and continued to play my game. Then I saw movement out of the corner of my eye. In between my bedroom and Lydia's and Emma's room was a black garbage bag that had started to lift itself off the floor. It's important to know that while I lived in Tennessee, I got a Ouija board as a Christmas gift from a friend that I still have to this day. All the kids had asked to play with it, and I would always tell them no as Ashley and Holly hated the fact it was in the house and stated I was not to play with it while in the house. One day, Emma's older sister, Crystal, had come over and begged to play with it, for only a moment. After speaking with Ashley, we got the okay, and I started a video so I could send it to my niece per her request. Nothing happened while playing with the Ouija board. However, the video we took should have been almost 20 seconds. I didn't watch it before I went to send it to Crystal, and kept getting an error that the video was too long. I went to check the video, and what should have been about a 20-second clip was saved as a 60-hour video. After we stopped playing with the Ouija board, it was just black screen and white noise in the video. After this, we started to hear footsteps upstairs when no one would be up there, and voices talking. Now it's 2025. My husband, Nate, Lydia, and Lilith have bought our own home. So far, nothing has happened here aside from my youngest dog, Javi, who sometimes stares at different spots in the house and will bark and growl. I have 3 dogs, Anakin, Leia, and Javi, and he is the only one who stares at the ceiling and corners of the house. Who knows what he's looking at? I witnessed a Skinwalker on Psilocybin from Casio 1. Some friends and I decided to go camping in the desert a few years back. What happened that night still keeps me up sometimes. I'm not sure if it was real or just the mushrooms, but I'll let you decide. We drove in late, headlights cutting across brush and stone. There were no houses, no fences out here. Just sand, scrub, and the smell of dust when we set up camp. There were 4 of us. I'll call myself C, and my friends R, M, and L. L and M had brought some whiskey and beer, but R and I had brought some mushrooms. Golden teachers, dry and brittle, not measured at all with care. We split a bag and chewed. They drank, and we all waited. By the fire, time came loose. R's face blurred a little at the edges, his grin rising and falling like his skin didn't quite fit. Above us, the stars slipped free from their constellations and drifted slowly across the sky. The desert no longer felt empty. It felt alive. When I stood to go to the bathroom, the shift came. Something stood out there maybe 20 feet from the fire. At first, I thought it was a coyote. Its outline was a match, but it was too tall. Its stance was stretched in a way that didn't sit right. Its head tilted toward me, ears upright, but the motions were careful, almost human. The wind touched everything here. My clothes, the mesquite brush. But that thing's fur stayed still somehow. I looked away, then back. It was still there. Was it waiting? Back at the fire, I asked, "Did you see that?" M frowned into his beer. "See what?" Before I could answer, R said, "It's here." His voice was flat, too sober. L tried to laugh, saying something about us being shroomed out, but the laugh came too hard and too quick, as if he was forcing it. His eyes flicked toward the dark when he thought we weren't looking. Coyotes began to call then. At first it sounded normal, but then the sound sort of bent. It carried long and strange, a high note breaking into something that sounded more like words, almost a woman's voice. It wasn't language that I knew, but it was shaped like speech, the kind of sound that pulled the hair up on the back of your neck because your brain wanted so badly to recognize it. The fire guttered, shadows rising tall against the rocks. R sat rigid, not moving. "It's closer," he said. And it was. Just at the edge of the firelight, there was the same coyote shape, but now it had shifted in ways. The body was longer, the shoulders were wrong, and the head was cocked. The longer I looked, the less it seemed like an animal. And then it spoke. Not loud, it was just a whisper. But it spoke my name, broken into pieces, and it carried on the wind. I froze. None of us moved. Then the fire cracked loud enough to make M jump, and when I looked back, the shape was gone. I awoke at dawn with sand in my mouth and a body sore as if I'd been crawling in my sleep. My sleeping bag was unzipped halfway. There was dirt caked under my fingernails. M and L were groggy and hollow-eyed, but R, well, he was gone. I asked, "Where did R go?" L shrugged. "He left before sunrise." His voice cracked on the word left. Past the rocks, I found tracks in the sand. Not boot prints or coyote prints, but these long and narrow impressions, pressed too deep, some sharp like hooves, others wide like bare feet. They led away in a straight line until they just stopped, the last print sinking into the sand with nothing beyond it. I told myself it was the mushrooms, a trick of the desert, my mind folding in on itself. But sometimes in the stillness, when the air holds its breath, I hear my name carried wrong through the dark. No animal's call, no person's voice, but something in between, trying it on for size. The Flood, from Silver Bullet54. People say time slips are real. In them, you may go back in time, travel to the future, or experience the past in some way, shape, or form. I never experienced one myself, but someone I know did. Not only did they slip back in time, but they ended up in one of the worst tragedies in American history. To this day, they're convinced they saw the after effects of the 1889 flood in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. The sights, the sounds, even the smells. The Great Flood of 1889, as it's sometimes called, killed over 2,200 people, including close to 100 entire families and nearly 400 children, after a preventable dam collapse occurred despite years of issues and multiple warning signs. When the dam collapsed, the entire town was inundated. To this day, people can see what happened in the city's history center. Now, for my friend. He was on a trip to the Johnstown Incline Plain when he suddenly heard a roaring sound. He looked up but didn't see a plane or a helicopter or jet, and he didn't see any huge vehicles on the street below, so he didn't know what accounted for it. As he tried to figure it out, a tour guide was just saying how the dam collapse could probably be seen from the exact spot they were at. He thought it was just a coincidence and that the roaring was all his imagination. When he took a walk around town, things got freakier. He was walking near the stone bridge where debris had piled up 40 feet high during the flood. As he walked, he suddenly smelled raw sewage, trash, garbage left in the sun, and smoke. He looked to the bridge and saw a mound of mud, trees, rocks, garbage, and some green and brown fluid that he couldn't identify. He also passed by what was supposed to be a hardware company, but he saw instead a schoolhouse based on pictures he had at home from his ancestors who had lived in Johnstown after the flood. He could also smell mold and mildew and decay, and even heard a woman crying somewhere. He looked behind him expecting to see another tour, but there was no one there. He was also dimly aware that the environment had changed. He looked around, seeing people in bonnets, breeches, slacks, coveralls, and other old clothing. He rubbed his eyes, expecting to see modern things again, but they were still wearing the old clothes. By now, he was getting really freaked out. It was like he had walked right from 2013 into 1889. He decided to lay low, trying not to be noticed, in case his modern look was seen as something evil, or that he was some kind of warlock. As he continued to walk, he saw every scene of destruction, every cemetery, every makeshift morgue, dazed children, shell-shocked women, and sobbing men. He was also getting upset due to the unexplained time loop he was apparently in. He wanted to go back to the present however he could. When he walked back the way he came, an undertaker came out of the schoolhouse, covered with mud and stains of what looked like blood, asking him, "Need some help?" My friend was really scared, but managed to stammer out, "Lavatory, perhaps?" The undertaker nodded and led him inside. After using the toilet, my friend pressed his head against the cool glass of the mirror for a couple of moments and tried to relax. He didn't know how or why he was in the past, and he had no idea how to get back. But then, as he walked back outside, everything was normal again. No flood, no mourning people, no more debris, fires, or anything. He shook his head and tried to figure out what had happened, and to this day he has no idea. Maybe it was a dream, or maybe, just maybe, he somehow had entered a time warp of some sort. All he knows for sure is that he saw a replay of one of the greatest disasters in history. Creepy Tree from Yarn Fanatic. I've seen many things that are unexplained in my young adult life, and this is one of them. My first paranormal experience I can remember happened in my first year of college when I was about 19 years old. I lived in a small town in the southern Midwest of the United States. The names I will change, and I'll keep the precise location of where I lived private, for safety purposes. I had just gotten a call from a friend of mine. I'll call her Taylor. And she told me that she and our mutual friend Nikki had seen something weird and wanted to show it to me. She didn't tell me then what they'd seen, but said that they'd pick me up to show me. They drove to my house, picking me up to drive outside our town limits to the farms and woods that were located throughout the rural area. We left the highway outside of town, taking small dirt roads for a few miles, though to this day, I still don't exactly know where they'd taken me. We drove for at least 20 minutes. Taylor told me on the way that the two had gone to an old bridge of some sort, parking on it because they wanted to take pictures. Getting out of the car, Taylor had looked out into a field and saw this lone tree which stood tall in the middle with nothing near it. She pointed this out to Nikki, and Nikki found it peculiar. They looked closer, seeing a light from the tree's direction. Apparently, it was on fire. The inside appeared to be glowing from lit embers inside of the trunk from within a gaping hole in the bark, most likely from rot, and illuminated by the light was something swaying in the breeze. Taylor walked closer to the edge of the bridge, trying to see better, and saw that the thing swaying looked like a rope, specifically a noose. The closer that we got to where they said they had seen this, I got a bad feeling. It felt weird and wrong, like something was watching us and did not have any good intentions. This feeling made me nauseous, and I kept staring out the window, trying to see if anything or anyone was around. I felt like this for about 3 minutes before we got to the bridge, and sitting passenger, I turned my head to Taylor, and I told her, "Do not stop the car." She looked at me weird but complied. As we went over the bridge, I heard Nikki say that the tree was gone. It had completely disappeared. The field where they'd seen it originally was now empty. Not even a trace or glow of anything that had been on fire. We made our way back to the highway, but that eerie feeling would not leave me. We made it back to the asphalt, driving quietly for a few minutes, when Taylor confessed something to me. She said, "Around where we were by the bridge, there had been a woman following us, just walking down the road. So that's why she never stopped the car, why she had listened to my warning." She then described the woman to me. Long black hair, a white dress. Now, I don't know this friend to be a liar, as she was always a kind lady, and I don't believe she would lie to me like that. I believe this was a woman in white who'd chosen to show herself to my friend, and thankfully no one I know has seen her since that instance. Why I'll never use a shower late at night again, and why I quit being a waitress. from Magpie24. For some context to this story, both my father's parents died in this house. I was freshly 18 years old and still living at home. I worked an 11.5-hour shift that day, so I was already exhausted from running around and taking orders as a waitress. I decided to jump in the shower after I got off, due to spilling food on myself that day. Our shower was located in the back room of our house, which, as I mentioned before, is where my paternal grandparents died. It always had an odd vibe and eerie feeling, like someone was watching you from the dark corner of the room. I hopped in the shower and turned the temperature to scalding. I went to reach for the shampoo when all of a sudden I noticed the lights getting dimmer and dimmer. In my newly adult brain, I thought the light bulbs were going out, so I didn't really pay much attention to it. I poured the shampoo in my hand and washed my hair. I then went to rinse it out with my eyes closed, and when I opened them again, I saw a full figure standing in front of me trying to move the curtain back so they could look at me. I screamed and pulled back the curtain to see no one standing there. I booked it back to my room screaming bloody murder. Safe to say, I did not sleep well that night. But the next day, I went into work for an afternoon shift to cover one of the waitresses who called out. It was kind of a slow day, and we closed early that night for that reason. It was my duty to vacuum the floors and wipe off the tables after we locked the doors, while my work mom was counting the drawer. I was minding my business, just getting up the crumbs, and saw her in the corner of my eye go around the kitchen, and I saw the door swing open and shut. So I followed her to ask if everything was okay, and no one was in the kitchen. I went out back, and she was smoking a cigarette, laughing with the kitchen staff who was throwing out old grease. I asked her if something was wrong, and I followed up with how she got outside so quickly. She gave me this confused look, like, what are you even talking about? I said that I saw her pink shirt go through to the kitchen, and not even 30 seconds later I found her outside. She told me that she'd been outside for 20 minutes now and had not been back inside yet. I freaked out, because it was 2 times in a row that I saw something paranormal. One of the girls, Felicity, not her real name, looked at me and said, "You saw it too, huh?" I turned to look at her, asking her what she means. She explained that our boss loved collecting haunted antiques, putting them in our storage facility right next door, and that it loves to torment the new hires. Once it gets used to you, it will leave. Safe to say, I soon left after that, and didn't look back. Don't get me wrong, I've seen plenty of ghosts or spirits in my lifetime, but nothing this extreme. I often wonder why it wanted me, and if they were the same thing, that it had just followed me home. But all I can do is hope that I never see it again, which thankfully I haven't since then. I pray that whoever works there now as a new hire hasn't experienced what I have. Creepo in my bedroom, from Seba23249. I want to start off by saying I'm Christian. I don't believe in all those cryptids. Until this happened. I'm 15 years old now, and this was about 8 or 9 years before. It was a regular day. I went to school, came home, had dinner, then went to bed. But that day, something changed. The air in my bedroom felt cold and heavy. I was young and stupid, so I didn't even think about it. This was the Australian winter in New South Wales, so this was usually normal, until I fell asleep. I woke up a couple of hours later, feeling watched. Before long, I heard it, a blood-curdling scream, which sounded like my mother. So I then got up and ran to her room. When I found her, she was fast asleep. With a sigh, I went back to bed. Again, I was young, so seeing my mother sleeping was just some confirmation that I was just tired. The night was playing tricks on me. When I came back to my room, I found my dog, dead, with his eyes gouged out, lying on my bed. I screamed, glanced around the entire room, but when I looked back at the bed, he was gone. My dead dog was no longer there. Now that really freaked me out. I had no idea why I was seeing things. I turned on all the lights and just left them that way for the rest of the night. In fact, I kept the lights on for weeks after that. I didn't experience those sights or sounds or whatever again for a while, though that cold and heavy feeling remained. Fast forward a couple of months later, I had forgotten about that stuff, and I could sleep with the light off again. But little did I know, this night would be the worst of all. It was a normal day, school, home, dinner, then bed. But this time when I walked into my room, it was freezing cold, like ice cold. I went to bed and tried to sleep. A couple of hours later, I woke up to a whispering sound coming from under my bed. Carefully, I looked down, but I saw nothing. Relieved, I rose back into my bed, only to see this towering figure looming over me. Its face was hooded with some sort of black cloth, and it was holding something. A staff, I guess, of what looked to be made of finger bones, human finger bones. I screamed. This time only a small squeak came out. The thing jerked back, moonlight giving me a glimpse of its face. It looked like flesh was falling or peeling from its skull. It had no eyes, just pits of blackness, and then it faded away into nothing. Shaken by this, I forced my eyes shut, covering myself with all my blankets, and after hours, I fell asleep. Ever since then, I'd never had anything like that happen, just these small whispers coming from under me. Fast forward a few years, we moved houses. The first night in the new place was pure bliss, and nothing has happened since then. I'm not sure what this was, but my theory is that a kind of demon or spirit had claimed that house as its own, and it was not happy about our presence. I'm just so glad we were able to move out of there. Demons, trees, and witchy cousins. Quite a collection of tales we had tonight. Leave me a comment below and tell me what you'd like to hear if we do a Halloween special this year. I'm currently out of ideas. Good night. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Unexplained Encounters. I've been your host, Darkness Prevails, and you can catch me on my other shows, like Tales from the Break Room, about scary work stories, Alone in the Woods, about scary wilderness stories, and a comedy show called Night Watchers, where me and my friends discuss horror-related things and talk real nasty. Adults only. Till next time, everyone, stay safe out there and stay creepy, because this world is a strange one.